A quarter acre of land can fully feed a family of 4, but only if you stop treating it like a hobby garden and start treating it like a system. Most people with a decent-sized yard spend years planting the wrong things in the wrong places and wondering why the grocery bill never drops. They grow tomatoes in July, zucchini nobody wants, and leafy greens that vanish after the first frost. Then October hits, the beds go empty, and they're back at the store buying everything. Sound familiar? Here's what changes everything. It's not the seeds you buy, it's not the soil amendments you add, it is the layout. 7 specific design decisions made before a single seed goes in are what separate a productive backyard food system from an expensive hobby that feeds you for 3 months a year. And by the end of this video, you will have all 7. Stay with me because the first one is the most overlooked step in all of small plot growing, and skipping it is why most people never break past 40% self-sufficiency. 1. The underground investment nobody talks about. Before anything grows above the soil, something has to happen below it. This is where most growers lose before they even start. They rake the surface, throw down some compost, and call it bed prep. What they have actually done is created a shallow growing zone on top of compacted earth that plant roots hit like a wall 6 inches down. The method that changes this traces back to intensive market gardens around Paris in the 1800s. Growers working tiny plots were supplying fresh vegetables to an entire city year-round. Researchers eventually studied those techniques, ran field trials across multiple continents, and confirmed the same result in over 140 countries. What those market gardeners were doing was simple but physically demanding. They were loosening soil to a depth of 2 full shovels, roughly 24 inches. The top layer comes out first. The hard pan beneath gets broken up with a fork. The top layer goes back in. That's it. What you've built is a column of open, aerated earth that roots can move through without resistance. Roots that hit compaction stop. Roots that travel freely through 24 inches of loose soil grow faster, reach more nutrients, and produce more food per square foot than they ever could in a standard raised bed. The documented yield difference is significant. Growers using this method consistently achieve 2 to 6 times the output of conventional plots on the same square footage. Water use drops by up to 88% because deep root systems pull from the full soil column instead of only the surface. External fertilizer need drops by half or more because the soil biology you've activated is already processing nutrients that were locked in the ground beneath your feet. Here is the part most people get wrong. This is done once, not every spring. Once a bed is properly prepared, you do not walk on it, you do not rototill it, and you do not compact it again. The structure you build in year 1 keeps improving on its own. Worm activity deepens it, decomposing matter feeds it. Every spring rototilling pass destroys the fungal networks and soil pore structure you spent the prior year building. Stop tilling, build it right once, and leave it alone. The downside is real. 100 square feet of initial prep takes 2 to 3 hours of hard physical work. It is a one-time investment, not a recurring task, and it pays for years without being repeated. But a perfectly prepared bed only produces as much as what you plant in it, which brings us to the decision that most quarter-acre growers get completely backward. 2. The allocation model that determines whether your land actually feeds you. Here is a question most backyard growers never ask. What percentage of my growing space is actually producing calories? Not vitamins, not flavor, not color. Calories. The energy your body needs to function every single day. If you are like most people, the answer is close to 0. Your beds are full of tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, salad greens, maybe some herbs. All of those are nutritious. None of them are feeding you at scale. A family of 4 cannot meet their caloric needs from a bed of lettuce, no matter how productive it is. The framework that solves this was developed through decades of documented agricultural research and has been stress-tested across growing climates worldwide. It divides your growing space into 3 distinct zones, each with a specific job. 60% of your space goes to compost and calorie crops. 30% goes to high-calorie root crops. 10% covers everything else. That 60% is where most people have never planted anything intentional. Grain corn, amaranth, sunflowers, fava beans, cereal rye. These crops pull carbon from the atmosphere and deposit it into your soil every season through their root system.
They also feed your compost pile the carbon-rich brown material it needs to function. Without this category, your compost pile runs short of brown matter within 2 years. Soil biology collapses, yields drop. No amount of manure fixes a carbon-depleted compost system. The 30% root crop zone is where your actual food fuel lives. Potatoes, sweet potatoes, parsnips, Jerusalem artichokes. The research applies a specific threshold here. To qualify, the daily weight of that crop required to meet one person's caloric needs cannot exceed 9 pounds. Carrots don't make that cut. Beets don't either. Potatoes do, sweet potatoes do. This distinction matters enormously on a small plot, where every square foot has a job. The remaining 10% covers leafy greens, garlic, onions, brassicas, summer squash, herbs. Essential and nutritious, but not your calorie foundation. Here is the hard truth. Most homegrowers fill their entire plot with 10% crops and wonder why the garden never feels like it's actually feeding them. A garden packed with vegetables looks impressive and delivers almost no calories. Flip the allocation and you build a fundamentally different system. A bed of potatoes produces 4 to 5 times more caloric value per square foot than a bed of tomatoes. That gap is where the difference between 90% self-sufficiency and 30% self-sufficiency lives. The downside is that 60% biomass crops, corn, amaranth, cereal, rye, do not look like a garden. They look like a small field. Your neighbors may find this puzzling, your soil will not care. You now know what to plant and in what ratio, but plant-based production alone cannot close every nutritional gap on a quarter acre. Protein and fat require animals, and 2 specific animals change the economics of the entire system. 3. The closed-loop protein pair. Rabbits were a food staple on small European farms for centuries before factory agriculture made backyard meat production feel unusual. French families kept rabbit hutches through both world wars because the animals required almost no space, generated no meaningful noise, and converted kitchen scraps into protein at a rate nothing else could match. Chickens have an even longer record. Domesticated roughly 8,000 years ago, raised in backyard flocks across every civilization in history, producing daily protein from almost nothing. The reason this pairing works on a quarter acre comes down to biology. A single breeding doe produces around 4 litters per year, raising 36 to 40 young annually. Each animal, harvested at 3 months, yields clean, lean meat at a feed conversion ratio of roughly 3 to 1. That is the most efficient conversion of any common land animal. Alongside them, 10 to 15 laying hens produce 900 to 1,200 square feet of your total property at a feed cost of approximately $15 per bird annually. Your family's full egg supply covered by animals that cost less per year to maintain than a monthly streaming subscription. The integration is where the system earns its footprint. Rabbit manure is cold manure. It does not need composting and will not burn plant roots at any concentration. Stack hutches above garden beds on wire-bottomed frames, and fertilization happens automatically, every single day, without you doing anything. Run chickens rotationally through beds that have already been cleared and harvested, and they consume pest larvae and weed seeds while depositing nitrogen into the soil between crop cycles. The animals are working your land between plantings without you operating any equipment at all. Here is the one detail that can break the whole thing if you miss it. Chickens in active growing beds will destroy seedlings within minutes. Rotational access means cleared, harvested beds only. Unrestricted access destroys what you spent the season building. Design the rotation schedule before you install anything. Build it into the layout from day one and enforce it every time, every season. A combined hutch and coop setup for this scale requires roughly 900 to 1,200 square feet of your total property. The downside is that processing rabbits is a skill most people have never learned. The first time is difficult. By the 10th time, it is routine. Rabbits and chickens close the protein gap, but both still depend on purchased feed. The next system nearly eliminates that feed cost using organic waste you are already throwing in the trash. 4. The waste converter that closes the feed loop. Black soldier flies have existed on Earth for millions of years. They are not pests. They do not bite humans, they do not invade kitchens, and they carry no disease. Their larvae exist for one purpose: to consume decaying organic matter at a rate most people have never witnessed.
Commercial aquaculture and poultry operations have used large-scale larvae production systems for over a decade because harvested larvae rival premium fish meal in protein value at a fraction of the cost. On a quarter acre, the same biology operates in a bin the size of a standard trash can.
Kitchen scraps go in: vegetable peels, fruit waste, coffee grounds, cooked food, garden trimmings, raw rabbit manure. All of it goes in. Larvae hatch, eat, and grow rapidly, converting that organic material into a feed source containing up to 42% protein and 35% fat. You harvest the larvae and feed them to your chickens. The birds pursue them with a focus that tells you everything you need to know about the nutritional value. Feed costs drop in a way that materially changes the economics of the entire operation over a season. But there is a second output most people miss entirely. The material left after larvae have processed everything through, called frass, is one of the most potent natural soil amendments you can apply. Rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and active soil microbes, it feeds your garden beds in a way synthetic fertilizers cannot replicate. What entered the bin as garbage exits as premium fertilizer. The larvae between those two states are free, high-protein feed for your animals. The one critical detail is temperature. The bin needs warmth, ideally between 75 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit. An uninsulated outdoor bin in a cold climate stalls completely below 60 degrees. Plan your setup for temperature management before the first cold season. A simple insulated box, a sheltered location, or placement inside a hoop house keeps the colony active and productive year-round. Colony establishment takes 3 to 6 weeks before meaningful harvest volumes appear. You are building a population, not flipping a switch. Patience in month 1 pays consistently from month 2 forward. Your protein loop is now largely self-funding, but a system that runs from May through September and then shuts down is not a food system, it is a garden. The next piece handles the months most small plots go completely dark. 5. The structures that add months to calendars says you cannot have. European market gardeners have been using season extension for over 300 years. Simple glass covers placed over individual plants were standard practice in the intensive gardens outside Paris by the 1800s, allowing winter harvests of lettuce and radishes when the open ground outside was frozen solid. Modern versions scale to unheated polytunnels spanning entire growing beds. The physics has not changed in 3 centuries. Trap daytime solar heat, hold it overnight, push your growing window by weeks or months on both ends of the season. On a quarter acre, that return is outsized because you're working in a compressed footprint. One French farm on a quarter acre that generated over $66,000 in annual revenue kept 42% of its growing area under unheated polytunnels year-round. That single structural decision contributed substantially to per square foot output 10 times higher than conventional mechanized farms nearby. In a small space, running 2 or 3 full crop cycles per year instead of 1 is not a marginal improvement. It effectively doubles or triples your productive land without adding a single square foot of ground. A cattle panel hoop house measuring 8 by 12 feet costs under $200 in materials and lets you start transplants 6 to 8 weeks ahead of outdoor planting dates. Cold frames built from salvaged windows and scrap lumber cost almost nothing and carry cool season crops through frosts that would otherwise end your harvest in October and leave beds empty until April. Here is the one critical detail that trips people up. Ventilate aggressively on sunny days, even in the dead of winter. Temperatures inside an unvented cold frame or hoop house can spike fast enough to damage or kill cool season crops within an hour on a clear January afternoon. A simple thermometer and a vent prop are not optional. They are what keeps your investment from working against you. The colder your winters, the higher the return on this infrastructure. Start with one cold frame over a single bed. Learn the temperature management before you scale to a full tunnel. Season extension closes the winter growing gap, but there is a resource gap on a quarter acre that no amount of intensive planting can fully close on its own. What determines whether the system reaches 90% or stalls at 60% is next. 6. The economic bridge that fills the gap you cannot grow. Every documented small plot self-sufficiency model on record confirms the same thing. No household reaching 90% food independence on a quarter acre is growing all of their own grain or cooking oil. The math does not work.
Producing enough wheat or barley to meet a family of 4's caloric needs from grain alone requires an additional 1/2 to 2 acres plus specialized processing equipment. Attempting it on a quarter acre displaces your most productive beds from the crops they already do better than anything else. The bridge works works differently. You dedicate a portion of your growing space, roughly 500 to 1,000 square feet, to high-value crops that sell well. Fresh herbs, specialty lettuces, edible flowers, cherry tomatoes, microgreens. These crops move at farmers markets and through direct relationships with local restaurants at $5 to $20 per pound. One French quarter-acre farm generated over $66,000 annually selling premium produce direct to restaurants. A California family generated up to $20,000 in annual produce sales from their suburban property. That income purchases grain, oats, and cooking oils in bulk. You are using the thing your quarter acre does better than any broad-acre operation, producing fresh, high-quality specialty crops to purchase the one thing it cannot do efficiently, which is staple grains and cooking fats. Here is the one critical detail. Your cash crops should be crops your family already eats. Herbs, salad greens, cherry tomatoes serve your household first and generate income from whatever grows past your own table. You are not running two separate gardens, one for money and one for food. You are building one productive system and selling the surplus. When income goals and food goals conflict, food wins every time. This model works within driving distance of any farmer's market, CSA network, or restaurant with a local sourcing preference. The downside is that building reliable produce sales takes time, consistency, and relationship building before the income becomes predictable. Produce without a committed buyer spoils. Build the buyer relationships before you scale the production. You now have beds producing food, animals running, a feed loop that largely funds itself, season extension in place, and income closing the gaps you cannot grow. One final layer turns all of it into a system that sustains itself for decades with almost no replanting. This last piece is what keeps giving long after everything else is already established. 7. The section of your property that produces without asking for replanting. Before industrial agriculture reduced small farming to bare fields and annual replanting cycles, most traditional small farms around the world incorporated layered perennial growing systems into their design. Agroforestry across West Africa, Southeast Asia, and pre-Columbian Mesoamerica stacked fruit trees, shrubs, ground covers, and root crops in systems that produced for decades without tillage or replanting. The first year required planting. Every year after that, the system produced and deepened on its own. On a quarter acre, 1,000 square feet, roughly 9% of the total property, planted as a layered perennial food system, delivers returns that grow with time. The upper layer holds 4 to 6 semi-dwarf fruit trees, apple, pear, plum, fig, or peach, depending on your climate. Beneath those sit berry bushes, blueberries, blackberries, currants, raspberries. Below those, strawberries, clover, and comfrey as ground cover. A single mature semi-dwarf apple tree produces 150 to 300 pounds of fruit per year. A row of blackberry canes yields 10 to 20 pounds per plant per season. Comfrey, cut 4 to 5 times annually, generates free high-nitrogen mulch for every growing bed surrounding it, replacing material you would otherwise purchase by the bag. Nutritional research on layered edible forest systems found that a well-designed perennial planting can meet nearly all human nutritional requirements annually, with documented shortfalls in only 4 areas: vitamin B12, vitamin D, choline, and selenium. Those are exactly the gaps your rabbit and chicken integration closes. Animal products, eggs, and meat cover what the plant system cannot provide alone. The two systems were designed to work together. Together, they cover what neither can cover alone. Here is the one detail that determines whether this investment pays or wastes years. Fruit trees need direct sun, a minimum of 6 to 8 hours per day. Map your sun exposure before you plant a single tree. A tree placed in the wrong location can sit in partial shade for 5 years and produce almost nothing. Fixing that mistake means transplanting a maturing tree or accepting wasted space for years. Spend one afternoon tracking sun movement across your property before you commit to a single planting location. The downside is timing. A perennial food layer takes 3 to 5 years to reach full production. It is not immediate. What it delivers when it arrives, hundreds of pounds of food year after year with no replanting, is the most durable output a quarter acre can generate.
Plant it first, before the garden beds, before the animals, before anything else. Give it its time. Now, let me tell you exactly how I know this works, because I did not start with any of it in place. 4 years ago, I had a backyard big enough to matter and a grocery bill I wanted to do something about. I had tried a vegetable garden twice. Both times it produced tomatoes in July, zucchini nobody wanted, and almost nothing else. Nothing that reduced what we spent at the store, nothing that carried us past October, nothing that felt like a system. I was filling every available bed with whatever looked appealing. Peppers, lettuce, cucumbers, cherry tomatoes, all 10% crops. No calorie crops, no perennial layer, no animals recycling anything. 3 chickens lived on the opposite side of the property from the garden. I carried scraps to them in a bucket and hauled manure back in a wheelbarrow, telling myself I would reorganize it all next season. I was skeptical that rethinking the entire layout would actually change anything. Moving the coop, rebuilding the beds, planting trees that would not fruit for 3 years, it sounded like a lot of disruption for a theory that was only proven somewhere else by someone else. But one winter, I mapped the property the way the research requires: 60% for calories and soil carbon, 30% for root crops, 10% for vegetables. Rabbits positioned directly behind the main growing beds, chickens rotating through harvested beds on a set schedule, a hoop house over the beds with the most winter-like, a perennial food layer in the corner with the best afternoon sun. By the second full season, the grocery bill had dropped more than $400 a month, not because we were eating less, because nothing was being wasted, because every system was feeding the next one. The layout is not a detail. The layout is the entire difference between a yard and a working food system. Before you start rethinking your own property, let me walk you through the 4 mistakes that cost people the most time and money. Mistake 1: filling your beds with vegetables and believing that is a food system. Tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, and salad greens are 10% crops, nutritious and worth growing, but delivering almost 0 calories. A bed of potatoes produces 4 to 5 times more caloric value per square foot than a bed of tomatoes. If your goal is genuine self-sufficiency, at least 60% of your growing space needs to be working on calories and soil carbon simultaneously. Most people never get there because a garden full of vegetables feels productive, even when it is not actually feeding anyone at scale. Mistake 2: skipping season extension. You can grow a full summer's worth of food and still spend every winter buying everything at the store if nothing is carrying production past October. A cold frame built from salvaged windows costs almost nothing and gives you harvested greens in January. Build it before the first hard frost, not after. Mistake 3: keeping your animals far from your growing beds. Every extra step between livestock and garden is nutrients ending up in the wrong place. Rabbit hutches above garden beds fertilize passively every single day. Chickens rotated through harvested beds improve the soil between crop cycles. When these systems sit on opposite ends of the property, you spend your time hauling, you lose the integration benefit, and you eventually stop maintaining the loop. Proximity is not a convenience. It is the mechanism that makes everything function together. Mistake 4: expecting perennial plantings to produce in year 1. People plant fruit trees, see nothing for 2 seasons, and replace them with something faster. A food forest is not a vegetable bed. Plant it first. Give it time. By year 5, it is producing hundreds of pounds of food with almost no labor from you. That is the most sustainable return a small plot can generate, and most people pull it out before it ever arrives. Here is what the system looks like when every layer is running. Root crops harvested in August, feeding the household through February. Rabbits and hens covering protein and eggs through every month of the year. A hoop house producing greens through every frozen week of winter. A perennial layer dropping fruit you preserved before the cold arrived. The grocery bill is not what it was. The land is not what it looked like 4 years ago either. 1 quarter-acre, designed with intention, was always enough. The land was never the limitation. The layout was. If this changed how you think about what your yard is actually capable of producing, hit that like button right now and subscribe to my channel. Every week on my channel, we go deeper into practical, no-fluff systems that work in real backyards. Drop a comment and tell me where you are in this